Just going to the game is different because when I usually leave my house, I see people on the corners waiting for Pullman Transit to take them up to the game, which is just sort of the fun of a game day.
We're all missing the Apple Cup tradition this year, but we can still listen to the voice of the Cougs. Welcome to Viewscapes, stories from Washington State Magazine, connecting you to Washington State University, the state, and the world. Hi, I'm Larry Clark, editor of the magazine. Glenn Johnson, mayor of Pullman and WSU football and basketball announcer, sat down for a talk with associate editor Adriana Janovich about his 40-plus years as voice of the Cougars and the surreal experience of announcing a 2020 football game at Martin Stadium without a crowd of fans.
Hi, I'm Glenn Johnson. I'm mayor of Pullman, but I've been with WSU now. I've been doing Cougar games for football and men's basketball since 1980. So that means I'm in my 41st year of being the voice of the Cougs as far as the public address is concerned. I'm a professor emeritus. I taught at the Murrow College for 35 years. And now I'm just busy being mayor and still doing public address, even during the COVID times.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about. It must seem surreal to be in the stadium without fans. Will you talk first about going to the stadium and being there with all those empty seats, and then what is it like to announce a game with no one in the audience?
Well, half the joy of being a public address announcer is just the sort of the prep time. And this year doing prep has been very, very different. We got the names, and yes, we have a flip chart just like we've had in the past, but you could tell there's a lot of things that are different because one, I don't have a season pass for Cougar Athletics from Sports Information that says public address announcer for football and men's basketball. We have individual game day tickets that you only get after you pass the attestation test and also get your temperature checked. But, just going to the game is different because when I usually leave my house, I see people on the corners waiting for Pullman Transit to take them up to the game, which is just sort of the fun of a game day. The day before, 2 days before, you see the RVs starting to pull into town. You don't see that this year. We had RVs usually lined up on Terraview Drive, and then they eventually get to the RV park right up on campus, and that excitement is gone. Usually you see all the hotels that are filled, and obviously with no one coming into town, the hotels aren't full, and some of them are basically very, very skeleton crews. They're just down to hardly anybody in there. When you start driving up, like I do usually on Colorado, and I go by Adams Mall, there's usually a lot of people around there, and you can see all the students they're in their sort of their game day outfits already. They're obviously prepping for the game at some of the watering holes. You go by the Coug and you see a lot of people there, and you don't see anyone. It's just like during a spring break or a Christmas break. There's just hardly anyone around. And then you get to the game and you're walking sort of all alone, and you get asked by a couple of people, "Where's your credential?" I'm going like, "Well, I don't have the credential, but this is what I do." And they say, "Yeah, okay, fine, you go through." And then you finally get to the press box where the elevator is, and someone asks you to say, "Okay, what's your name?" And I give them, and then they say, "Okay, you're on the list." And you go up, and then you get your temperature checked. And because I just walked all the way from Boulder Gym and climbed the stairs and got up to the press box, for some reason my head was cold, obviously. So it didn't quite come through on the temperature reading, so they had to take that about 3 different times to finally get that going. They gave me an N95 mask. Usually that doesn't happen. I mean, I came in with a mask, believe me. I walked the campus with a mask. It was a Cougar mask too. And so now you've gone through all that check, and usually the press box up on the 4th floor where I work is filled with people. And in the security area, usually I stop by there and I talk to our police chief and our fire chief and the game management people, and no, they weren't there this time around. And then you walk down to your public address booth, which we normally would have probably about 3 people in the front row and at least 3 in the back row. And I've got to really hand it to Cougar Athletics because they did everything they possibly could do to make sure that the game experience that we were working was safe. They had us all separated. I was on one extreme of that public address booth to the far right. Jen Chow, who is our marketing and promotions director, who basically is the producer of the game, she's sitting on the far left. We have Brent, who's running all the sound from in terms of volume, who also does the same thing over at Beasley Coliseum, and Kayla, she was doing some of the effects, and that's it. Just four of us, and they all had masks on. We actually had a plexiglass between myself and Jen, so again, they were doing everything safe. I came in with my Clorox wipes. I wiped down the area I was going to be in, and I wiped down the microphone to make sure that was clean, and did everything we could, to be safe. And be honest with you, I felt safe in there. I also had my hand sanitizer in my pocket ready to go, and I used that a number of different times during the game. But then that was sort of the pre-part. But usually I'm always there 2.5 hours before game time because I have to go through all the script, all the commercials, all the things that we read during the game, what kinds of events we're going to have, what the band's going to do, those kind of things you go over. And there was none of that. We had pregame, in which we had a national anthem that was piped in because we had no band. We had the moment of solidarity that both teams lined up. It was a Pac-12 thing that we did and announced for that. But there were no commercials. The game was brought to you by BECU. That was in our introduction kind of thing. But from that point on, we had no commercials until the end, when it was not even a commercial. It was next game will be on the road at Stanford. So from a standpoint of not reading every moment, the other thing, which is unusual, I probably get maybe 4.5 to 5 minutes at the most at halftime to run to the restroom and then get some new hot water and for the second half. And there was no band. There were no spots to read. So we actually had a little time to rest during halftime. It was sort of like, well, geez, I'm back here, but I've got another 11 minutes to kill. But at least they told me ahead of time, there's no food, there's nothing, you have to bring everything you have. So I brought everything, and that helped out. But it was interesting from that standpoint. Again, I've got to hand it to Cougar Athletics. They really did a heck of a job trying to make sure that everybody felt safe. I was talking to Matt, who does the radio part, and listening to what he was going through over at his end. And we were all trying to do the best we can because our dictate from the Pac-12 was try and create a game day experience. And you're doing the best you can without a crowd. Now, granted, there was crowd noise going through there, and we had that. We pumped that up when the Cougs did something great. I did, and that's another Cougar first down. I did a number of those. During the game, we had plenty of Cougar first downs, which was great. The first half was quite good. But usually I let the crowd finish that off. I started up and let the crowd finish, and you sort of play off of that. This time around, you just had to complete it yourself. You try to do the best job you could on that. I don't recall how many, I don't think we had any no gains on this one here because they just seemed to go through our defense, but we stopped a lot of cases, and we had some recoveries. We had some fumbles that on Oregon's side in the first half, and we recovered it. So that was some good news. We got a chance to pick up the energy as much as you possibly could. You could pitch it the best way you could, but it was interesting. You know that you feed off the crowd. You love to see the crowd there. You love to see the people there. And just all that excitement. Hey, there's a game going on. Even if you're behind at halftime, you talk to some people in that short time period. Hey, we'll pull it out the second half. Well, you don't talk to anybody because you're all in your booth and you're all secured and everything else. So that was sort of interesting.
What were the things that you brought with you to get you through the game? You mentioned you had to bring everything with you. Was that your tea or your snack?
I had 2 containers of hot tea, and I have 1 container of water. and I made a peanut butter and jam sandwich just in case I needed. So I got that half peanut butter, and I cut that in half, so you never know how much you're going to get a chance to eat. So you had a half sandwich there, so that gets you through.
What did you miss the most about not having the crowd there?
Well, I think playing off them is the fun part, and listening to them. And the other thing, it's just not the crowd; it's the band, the cheerleaders, and all the other people that just make the game a game day experience. I love the Cougar Marching Band. We have made such improvement in the Cougar Marching Band over the years. It's just fun to watch them. It's fun to watch the beginning part at the halftime, to listen to them during the game. You know, we have a good size. When I started doing PA for the Cougar, and again, I got my master's out of UCLA, so I saw some pretty good bands over the years. I was at Iowa, and we had some great marching bands down there. I can remember a time when I first started doing PA, and we had a very small marching band. I think we had like 60 members. We could barely do a W when I first started. And to see how it had been built up over the years, and we get over 200, and it's just wonderful to see, and to see all the excitement in the marching band. I played in a marching band in high school, and I played trombone, and you love listening to the bands. And we have a great band here too, you know, over the years, and just to watch how it's developed. You miss that part. You miss the crowd cheering. There's some cheers the crowd makes that I didn't miss. Has to do with the Huskies, but I'm not going to go any further than that. But anyway, the crowd really gets into it. So that's the part you miss a lot. But just the overall game day experience, watching, looking over to the side, you can see the RV park, and they usually have a lot of pre-funking they're doing, and they're having barbecue ahead of time, and then you see them walk over to the ticket office and get into the game. You can actually watch that. You see them moving over there. You see the buses unload a lot of fans. Those are the kinds of things that weren't there this particular time around. But again, from the other standpoint is, we were so grateful to be able to do a game and to see some TV revenue coming to WSU, because there was no revenue coming in from ticket sales, from merchandising, all the other things that go along with it. And everyone, just like at the city, you project what your revenue source is going to be, you project what your expenses are going to be, and all of a sudden COVID hits, and guess what happens to your revenue? It's not there, and you're not having games, and just taking a look at how much the deficit is. And that was, legitimate projections on the basis of what Pac-12 TV revenue should be, and what all the universities did, and then not to have that. So the fact that you could actually pull off some football, you had TV here, we were on Fox nationwide, that should help out. But just to be able to pull a game off, and we had that same weekend, I'm thinking about at least 4 or 5, and at least one Pac-12 school that had to be canceled because of COVID-19. And the fact that everybody did their thing right, and we were able to pull off a game here, I think that says something. It says something for athletic marketing. It says something for athletic game management. You got to really hand it to them for being able to do that.
Did you have any idea that here you would be 41 years later still announcing games? Did you have any idea how long your career as a WSU announcer might be?
No, because when you first, one of the favorite stories I think I hear from a lot of people when they come to Pullman and they come on the faculty, is they say, "Oh, I'll give it a 3-year shot and then see what happens." And 30, 40 years later, they're still here giving it a shot. But no, when I first started, and again, we had to do some of the games up in Spokane. All the major games had to be done at Joe Albee Stadium, which meant we had to drive up there, do the games. Back in that time period, we all had to carry mimeograph machines up to the alleged press box at Joe Albee Stadium. That's how they got all the different stats off to the news media that was around there. So yeah, that goes back quite a ways. And Albee wasn't the greatest place in the world, but it was, that's what they wanted to do. That's where the big crowd was. So I was very grateful when we finally could get it back to Martin Stadium. And I always thank Jim Walden for really getting Sam Jankovic to move us back because he said every time we go to Spokane, it's a away game. So we want to be here with a crowd. And it was dangerous too, because students were driving up to Spokane. And so when you talk about winter games and the snow and the ice, it's not really very safe for students or fans to be driving that road too. So grateful to have it back at Martin Stadium. Of course, now the fans came down from Spokane and elsewhere to go to the game, but they could do it a couple days ahead of time too, and they could make sure it's safe. But no, I didn't think that we'd be here that long, especially when you take a look at the number of athletic directors I've been under for all those years, and each one comes in with a different set of opinions of what the public address should be doing. And the fact that I was able to survive all those public address and all those athletic directors during that time period, that says something. I heard from one friend of mine who says, why doesn't this particular athletic director like you? And I'm going, I didn't know that. They never told me that. But yeah, you survive that and they leave and I still stick around. Of course, we're not talking about a big budget impact with the PA announcer. They don't pay that much, okay? And if you really look at the number of hours you put in doing your prep thing, that you mark up your program, you have those things down, you get all your pronouncers done, and you do all that, and you're down to about minimum wage by the time you finally get done with it. But you're doing it because you like the university, you've been a part of it, you've been a part of athletics, you want to make sure that you do your best. I always look at it as I'm doing the best professional job. I make sure that I'm always prepared. I make sure that I meet with the SID ahead of time before the season starts to go over the names to make sure we say them correctly. Because one thing you learn over the years when you either announcing names at graduation like I used to, and same thing is you can look at a name and by George, you can pronounce it 3 different ways by the way some parent decided to make it, one way or another. And, whether it's Megan or Megan or whatever, you usually don't come up with those names, but at graduation you do. But there's a lot of different ways of pronouncing names. And sometimes I'll ask an SID, okay, I said, I've heard that different ways. Like just this past weekend, we had a Mather, okay? I was in Sacramento. We had a Mather Air Force Base, but this one here is a Mather, or different ways of doing things. And there's another difference too, is that normally in a press box, we have the sports information people from the opposing school. We didn't have that this time around. They were not in the press box. They were down apparently in the field staying. So Oregon stayed by Oregon and they were not up at the press box with us. So I didn't have a chance to sit down with them. I did get their pronouncers ahead of time for what they had. There were a few that could have gone either way, but that was something that was different too. Usually I always meet with the sports information people, usually about an hour and a half or whatever before the game, and just go over the last minute, just double checks. But we didn't have that either.
Speaking of names, what are some of the big names that stand out to you and from the last 40 years that were particularly fun to announce or pronounce?
Well, I think you have more fun with some names in basketball probably than you do in football, though we had some that the fans could to get part of during football. But I think I told Craig this one time, I said, I think that was my all-time favorite name was Craig Elo, because it just worked well. And if he just did something fantastic in basketball, I could say E and I could hold that all the way. And the team was down at the other end of the court by the time I finally finished with Low. Now, a lot of things like that have been changed by the Pac-10 and Pac-12, where you can't make a lot of those kinds of things that we used to be able to do. Just look at introductions alone for basketball. It's been changed where at one time we could pretty well go on as long as we wanted to with an introduction. Nope, that's limited to a certain amount of time because I think other announcers were doing the simpler things like that. So no, we have a limited time that we can do announcers. And then now we've got all kinds of video introductions. So the video introduction goes first, and then we get to tag it off with the starting lineup. So that has changed over the years. There have been some names in football, but the memorable ones I think were more from basketball than probably from football. But it is nice to have. I just got to say this because Martin Stadium, when I first encountered it, had little speaker systems about every 10 yards. And they had these horn speakers that probably, maybe, if we were lucky, 50% of them worked. It was a horrible public address system. And I was so grateful for athletic director Jim Livengood, who actually invested some money and got a different PA system in there, where they got a system where people could actually hear it. And that was so delightful, because then you could actually announce it. You could actually hear the crowd react to it, as opposed to the system before. But yeah, some may have heard it, some may not. And but no, we've made a lot of great strides, got to say, over those 40 years. The press box, of course, where we're in now, is so different compared to where we started. When I first started in the old press box at Martin Stadium, we had no glass in the windows. So when you did the game and you're sitting down doing the game, you better come there in the winter with long underwear, with double shirts, with gloves on, and then the snow's coming in on you and the rain's coming in on you. And you have your program marked, in ink, and you got to keep that dry so you can actually read your notes. I mean, we have made a big, just when we finally we got glass in the window. Oh yeah, wonderful. That's super. Okay, that was a big stride. And then when they moved us, I was down by the 20-yard line, I think, when I first started. And then Rod Commons was a sports information director and got us back into where the news media was located. That was close to 45, 50. It was actually this is the old press box. So in the old press box, we were really close to the president's box. And so we had a chance to chat with him, and we could have at least a hot dog or whatever. And I remember joking when they remodeled the president's box, and they did just a little bit for where the news media sat, where I sat. I was up on a top level. And I was joking with Keith Bloom, who was the construction manager. He also served on our city council. And I said, the least I could do is get a new chair. And so the next game, I had this new chair is brought in, and I'm going like, what? He actually took it seriously. He says, yeah, we got your chair. And they had a little sign on the back, voice of the Cougs, Glenn Johnson. And I was joking with Elson Floyd. And I said, hey, boy, I really appreciate that chair. And he says, we stretched the budget to get you a new chair, kind of thing. I said, oh, great. And he would ever so often remind me about, hey, I got you a new chair. Yeah, what more do you want, kind of thing. We'd have that kind of joke. But then then we get the new press box, and that was super. That was like big time. That was like the big schools. And that was great for the impression that you leave others, that you can use it for other purposes. It was really neat. And where I'm at today, it is absolutely amazingly different from where we first started, because we can actually close the window. We can actually raise the window. And yes, we normally have the window open a little bit. We did during this game, so we can hear how the PA sounds and hear what the music sounds like. And one of the challenges that we had when we first started that game with no one in the crowd is that you're limited to how much decibels you can have in terms of noise. And we would get called back from, it's not me, that's another person in the room that was dealing with this, is that it's too loud or something like that. The officials said was too loud. So they had to back off, and they kept playing around with it. And so we finally got that one all adjusted. Those are some of the things that people were dealing with that you never had an issue with before, because when you have a crowd, they absorb that sound. And I did hear from one person who lives up on Military Hill, and they said, just knowing what everyone's going through, it was fun to at least hear the PA coming up to Military Hill. We could actually hear that there was a game going on, even though there were no one in the crowd, but at least that was fun.
That sure is a lot of changes and improvements, it sounds like, from where we started in 1980 to where we are today.
Well, I tell you, doing a game today compared to the game when I first started, it is highly produced. I feel like I'm working back in television again with a producer that goes through and talks through all this and says, okay, here's what we're doing at this particular time. Here's what we're doing at this next time. This is what we have to do at halftime. All those kinds of things that are out there. So It's very produced. And there you can actually hear our person, calling when the band plays, when the cheer squad's doing certain things. We have all that kind of stuff that we're doing today. So yeah, it's been really a challenge to try and it's been fun. And I like being highly produced, but those are the kinds of the challenges you have today.
Speaking of TV, you worked in TV and radio and then taught TV and radio and communications management at WSU for 35 years. Are you still in touch with some of your former students, and where have some of them ended up?
I hear from some of the students. One, matter of fact, I was just with about a week or so ago, and that's Keith Shipman, who's now the CEO and president of the Washington State Association of Broadcasters, and he owns some radio stations down in Oregon. Cindy Brunson, who was with ESPN, has done Pac-12 games. Jamie Sayers, I've heard from occasionally, from time to time. Eric Johnson, who anchors over at Como in Seattle, I hear from time to time. Mark Wright, who is at King TV in Seattle. Others that you hear from time to time, you see maybe a Facebook note or whatever. There are a lot of students out there, and it's great. At one time on the State Broadcasters Association, I think I had like 3 or 4 of my former students who were serving on the board. Patricia McCrae, who was the general manager of KHQ TV in Spokane. She was on there. We've had some other ones that have served on that board. So it's sort of fun. And you hear from them. And, the neat part is once in a while you hear from people saying, hey, you really had a real positive influence on my life. And I've heard that from people who didn't go into broadcasting, just the fact that, we had some great training. We listened to people. We gave them encouragement, and to see how well they've done in a variety of fields, which is sort of nice to have.
If you could talk directly to the fans, any message for them during these unusual times?
Well, the one thing is that we definitely miss the fans, and I know the fans miss the experience. I know they miss the chance of having their barbecue out there in the RV and all the fellowship that they have and meeting fellow Coug fans and all the things that go on, all the pregame and just all that stuff is missed. But we do appreciate the fact that the fans did listen to our messages to stay home, because we're hoping that we're going to have a fantastic 2021 season where everybody can be back with a vaccine going and we can protect each other. But right now, thank you very much for staying home and protecting yourselves, but again, protecting our community and not impacting our hospitals and not impacting our fire and police. They did a good job on the first game we had here. They listened, they stayed home, they did their thing, and we appreciate that.
Well, and we appreciate you for giving us time today on Viewscapes.
Thanks for listening to Viewscapes, a monthly podcast from Washington State Magazine. Our theme music was written by Greg Yazanitsky. For more WSU stories, videos, and photos, visit magazine.wsu.edu.